All right. I'm going to relay some experiences I've had and my understanding of Abraham from a new perspective in some sense. And this will give insight into the Abraham thing and why, even though it was seemingly despicable, it was actually good in the end, and so on. And I'm going to resolve Kierkegaard's quadratic or four different interpretations in a single, this is exactly how it is kind of approach. So basically, in the story of Abraham, God promises Abraham his son, Isaac, who will carry on his legacy. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Because that's important, that God told him that ahead of time, that Isaac would lead to many kids of his own and so on. And that's a promise of God's. And the lesson of the story. Now, the lesson of the story is that when God promises something, it'll basically happen no matter what. No matter how much our conventional eyes, conventional ways of seeing the world differ, when God promises something, it's going to happen. No matter what. No matter what life is screaming at your face that it's not going to happen. And what God is saying to Abraham every step of the way is do this thing, sacrifice your child, and so on. And the purpose of that is not some sort of you have to obey God or he won't give you what he promised kind of situation. It's part of the promise, even if it seems counterproductive when you follow God. Even when life is screaming at you that God's veritable promise isn't going to happen, going with God's commands, no matter how counterproductive it seems, will Deus Ex Machina or miracle or plot armor your way in ways that are beyond human comprehension, more or less, into what God promised you. That's the story of Joseph in a sense. If you notice, there's the process is the promise, and it also doubles as an example of how God works in His people, in His chosen ones. And they get they tend to get the rough end of the stick when they're promised something, but ultimately they get exactly what they want or what God promised them and so on, and usually what God promised them is exactly what they want. Abraham is a response to Job. It's an elaboration of Job in some sense. And Joseph is an elaboration of Abraham. Joseph, the dream interpreter. And what you'll notice is maybe in Abraham's story, Isaac didn't believe in God as fully as Abraham did. And Abraham was telling Isaac or his servants specifically that God would provide the sacrifice. And Abraham knew God promised Isaac would father many nations or something like that as well. And what that means is it's sort of like cheating in a sense where you can go through the motions because God demands it. But you kind of there's a lack of understanding of exactly how this is going to bring about the thing that you want that God promised. But there's something to it. And for Isaac, being about to be sacrificed by human sacrifice or child sacrifice, and then there being a lamb suddenly that Abraham can sacrifice instead, just at the right moment, was a teachable moment that God does this kind of miracle to convince Isaac to carry on Abraham's legacy. So it's like a self-reinforcing structure. Abraham knew God promised Isaac would grow up and have kids on some fundamental core grain of hope level. He just wasn't sure God promised God would break his promise or keep his promise. But he was going to obey God all the way. And what that means is that just in the nick of time, miraculously, there was a lamb to be sacrificed. And Isaac looked at that and said, "Oh, that's what a miracle is. Oh, that's how God operates." My dad wasn't exactly crazy. He's actually telling the truth. And that's the lesson of the Abrahamic story, the binding of Isaac. And I have insider information on this kind of process because what happens is, and keep in mind, this is not for their benefit precisely. In a way, it is kind of chosen people and so on. But because it's for the benefit of others as well, because we get to hear the story, and so on. And I have insider knowledge on this kind of thing because God told me to end myself 46 times, and I tried to, and I survived all of it. Like, you know how like the liberal woman were taking like one bottle of Tylenol one time and then they're dying? I took 7 bottles over 7 different days over 2 months. Like 1 bottle an hour, 7 different days over 2 months. And I survived. I got shot in the guts. And I would have died, but I survived. I got smashed in the head by a car. You know, like I've survived a lot. And as far as I can tell, God put me up to it. So it's like, okay, you know, what's that about? But I do remember he told me through a friend who was prophetic that I would survive it all. You know, I just, in the moment, in the heat of the moment, I was doubting it. I'm like, well, God's telling me to end myself, so I mean, that's kind of a finality to it. And so on. But what I got out of this situation is that I can actually understand the Abrahamic story now. And I can actually sympathize with other people. And it's helped me potentially rescue multiple people from despair and suicide and so on. And I believe this is the path to my own glory in the future. And it just self-reinforces. It's sort of like it's sort of like how Yoda, in his wisdom, says, "Don't go to Sky City or whatever to Luke Skywalker, or else he'll turn to the dark side." But exactly doing the opposite of that gets him to get his dad, Darth Vader, to the light side. And he saves his friends. In the end. It's a weird way of looking at the world, in some sense. It's a very weird way of looking at the world. God promises you'll get something. He tells you to do the opposite of getting it. And then somehow, miraculously, that's the process by which you actually got it. And, like, glory and honor and victory and so on, as they call it. It's not just you survived, it's that it brought you to new heights of success by following God's orders, even when they seem like they would destroy you. And the lesson is that even when God promises you this is the path, you can doubt it. But you do follow it anyways, because you have a rough faith in God's righteousness. And you trust God to do what's right on some level. And even when everything else in the world is screaming at you that this is the wrong way to do it, when God Almighty tells you to do it, He gives you everything you could dream of. Because you did it. In the stupidest ways possible. I mean, it's like the closest way to describe Abraham and my situation and so on is looking at Domino from Deadpool 2 and looking at how everything just works out for them and so on. Even in their woundings. It's sort of like a movie where you know the heroes are going to get a happy ending, but they don't. And all of their suffering and so on speaks to you and is a declaration of a vision of the world of the director and the scriptwriter and so on. And so on. And you're simultaneously an actor as well as the character in the movie. So you know at least part of the script, and you can guess because you've seen these movies before that there's going to be a happy ending to your character or something. And yet at the same time, you're also the character who doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. And that's kind of what Samwise was getting at when he was talking to Frodo about the great stories where the characters didn't know if they could make it, but they kept going because that's the only thing that was right. Because there's something good in this world and it's worth fighting for. In Osgiliath, after saving Frodo from the Nazgul, and he's saying it's all wrong. It's kind of a meta position, a superposition, quantum superposition of knowing it's going to work out for your favor and also not knowing that it's going to work out for your favor. And this isn't just like mushy sort of like, don't describe it kind of situation. This is simultaneous one and the opposite at the same time. Existing at the same time, but one is future directed and based on God's promises. Now, I don't want to say that everyone's situation is going to be identical, but I think a lot of us have had experiences where we can kind of understand where this is going. Like if you're like, I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing. I don't know if I'll survive it. And then you do it, and then it's just like, whoa, that was amazing. I totally succeeded at everything I ever wanted to do by risking it. There's a fundamental structure to the world that enables that to be the thing. And the story of Abraham is precisely following God's orders after he tells you he's not going to actually demand it of you, but getting closer and closer to the situation where it's going to be the case that the thing you're afraid of is going to be true, and just following God's commands to get closer and closer to that situation until he provides an out that you would never see before. And I'll give another example of how this works out. So my previous two videos, yesterday I mentioned the government shutdown and how Trump might end up looking bad to the Christian voters of his, because it seemed like he wasn't even playing ball. And my first panicky disposition was he should at least send people to government to look like they want to get SNAP benefits funded. And then I thought of another 4D chess move where he's actually shunting or laying out states taking over the federal welfare program. And that was like, okay, that's like part of it. So there's two options, is what I imagined. And then what I learned after I posted that is that the Democrats actually came out and said that and admitted that they were the ones behind the government shutdown and they know the poor are going to suffer and so on. So all my fears that Trump would look bad because he's not taking care of the poor, supposedly, and the two ways that I dreamt up of dealing with it resulted in someone telling me, you don't have to worry about any of that because the Democrats put their foot in their mouth completely. But I wouldn't have seen that if I hadn't have made those videos or made those posts. So it's like, okay. So that's kind of how you approach, these stories and this rambling is the right way to approach the Abraham story in some sense. And my own situation of like God telling me, you're going to survive every single time you try to end yourself, and it'll be the path you get your girlfriend back. And then in the process of this journey, me forgetting mostly what he said, and kind of vaguely remembering he kind of said it, and I was like, well, that doesn't seem to be the case. But, you know, I guess it doesn't matter. I'll follow God's orders. And then, lo and behold, I survive every attempt. And I'm better able to sympathize with people going through hard times and so on. And this also led to a character change. And this is the process of character change that is going to get my ex-girlfriend back. And he told me ahead of time I would do this. And I was like, that's crazy. But he led me down a garden path halfway through, forgetting mostly what his promise was, but just following his orders after I forgot the promise. And then him seeing me through it all. And my guess is this is the process by which my ex-girlfriend comes back, which would never have happened if I hadn't done all this stuff and learned these lessons and so on. because it's a character change. It's changing me into the man who can deserve her from where I was before, where I didn't deserve her. And she will recognize this. And that's Abraham in a sense. So rather than looking at this in the autistic sort of materialist frame of reference, or the ethical sphere of reference, as Kierkegaard will put it, you look at it at the religious sphere, and you look at it as not one of 4 different bad options, but one of God will tell you you'll make it. God will then let you forget that he told you you'd make it. And then God will order you to do things that make you think it's the end. And then it'll showcase God's absolute balls to the wall, insanely brilliant plot devices, plot armor, miracles, Deus Ex Machina, ass pulls in your favor. And that's what it means when they say God's strength is made perfect in your weakness. And so on. It's a hell of a trip, but when God promises you'll make it through it, he's not saying you'll barely scrape by in the end. He's saying you'll actually be like a conqueror, or more than a conqueror, in the end. And this process that seems so counterproductive in so many ways to our limited understanding could be the very path to salvation and redemption and victory and success that we actually wanted in the first place.